Okay, so today I will be ranking the best division in the UFC right now. I'm not ranking this based off just my opinion alone, because I think that would be pretty hypocritical if I was like, oh, Charles Oliveira is my favorite fighter, and I put the lightweight division at number one. Oh, and John Jones is the best fighter pound for pound, and therefore the heavyweight division is the best division in the UFC. That would be completely unfair of me to do that. So I will be adding some criteria to this list to help remove some of my bias and to really narrow down and get really specific with the intricacies of every division itself. Now, with this criteria, I will be firstly ranking number one based off of skill and skill alone. Now, this skill is not for just the top two fighters. Obviously, there is a few divisions where there are a few guys who are very, very skilled, but I will be ranking the division as a whole, not just a few fighters. Number two will be talent slash prospects. And this is based upon, who is coming up in your division, who is rising, who is getting to the rankings, who is beating the older guys. Because we all know when new talent comes up in the division, that means the division is getting better. If your division stays old and stays stagnant for a very long time, that means you're not progressing. This is how sports works. As time goes on, the sport is supposed to get better. And if your division is not getting any new fresh talent or fresh meat in there, it's not getting better. So we need to make sure we're having good contenders on the come up, good prospects we have that are coming up, and really always challenging some of the older fighters at the top of the division or somewhere in the middle as well. And lastly, number three, we have name value. Now, this is kind of different than the first two. I kind of have the first two kind of like almost taking an AP course or a college course in high school. They're weighted higher. And what I mean by that is that I kind of rate number one and number two more highly than I rate number three, because name value kind of is a more of a fun sort of thing and more of a skill sort of thing. It's more measurable. I would agree to that. But I think it's more of adding a little bit of outside surfacing to the criteria. So it will be name value. This is how many pay-per-views your guys can sell. This is how noticeable you are to the casual fan. That's what I'm really basing this up on. I'm not going to waste any more of your time. We're going to dive right deep into this. Now, at number 8, I don't think this is much of a hot take. I think this is more widely considered the worst division in the UFC right now. And it is for sure the heavyweight division. I put John Jones there. Obviously, John Jones is not the worst fighter in the UFC. This is just the champions representing the entire division. So I have each individual head of every champion. I'm going to put 1 through 8 on here. But John Jones does represent the heavyweight division. And I think the heavyweight division is very easily the worst division in the UFC. We see it time and time again outside of the top 5 fighters. Everybody else is really, mediocre at best. There isn't much skill, there isn't much technique outside the top 5. It's very rare. And when we see new prospects and guys who are outside the rankings, there isn't much skill at all. And that's a huge factor at a heavyweight. It just seems like it's a really bare bones division because the talent also gets pretty much pushed very quickly to the top of the rankings. We see this all the time. Tom Aspinall said he wanted to take it slow coming up in the division. And guess what? He got Volkov in like his 3rd or 4th fight. I don't remember exactly. But he got Volkov fairly quickly coming on the come up. So it's just hard. And we see it all the time, man. Like, just prospects coming into this division who are like 5-1. Like, I think we saw Braxton Smith, the last pay-per-view card against Parker Porter. That was kind of an embarrassment, in my opinion, for the heavyweight division. And it's just like there's not many prospects coming up. And when they do come up, they're pretty much rocket up the rankings as fast as possible because they're a good prospect for heavyweights. Now, in terms of name value, obviously there is name value. This division is probably one of the more popular divisions. Definitely, 100% definitely one of the more popular divisions because of its heavyweight division. There's so many KOs, there's so many highlight reels going on within it. So it's almost impossible to not make a name for yourself in this division. But I just think their skill and the prospects are just not there at all. And it really ruins it, man. And John Jones is obviously the biggest name. But it's just like, he's a light heavyweight, really. He moved up to heavyweight. He made his name not in the heavyweight division. And I just can't really rate them that highly. Now, moving on, Number 7, this one might be somewhat of a surprise. In my opinion, it's not. I think this one is very clearly number 7 as well. Maybe you can argue at number 6, but I think it is number 7. That is the middleweight division. I'm sorry, but this division is, I think it's a step above heavyweight. It definitely is, I believe, better than heavyweight. But Jesus Christ, man. The skill outside the rankings in this one is almost, I wouldn't say it is as bad as heavyweight, but it's darn close, man. It's slightly better at heavyweight. And it's very top heavy. We have pretty much Robert Whitaker and Adesanya sitting here at the top of the rankings, pretty much dominating everybody else. It's very, very top heavy. We see new prospects like Dricus du Plessis not look the best technically striking at all. I love Dricus, man. He's a great personality, but he just doesn't look like a very elite level fighter. Grappling maybe, but striking 100% not. And he's been doing a lot of striking recently, so I'm worried about him. You know, Derek Brunson controlled this division for a long time. He almost got back to a title shot, beating Darren Till and Kevin Holland. Like, he was making waves again at his old age, and we see his striking technique. It is abysmal. He has the worst striking in the division by far, and he's ranked. So that tells me a lot about the middleweight division. There are some new prospects coming up, but it feels like every time we see a new prospect in the middleweight division, they end up losing before the rankings or when they hit the rankings. It happened with Nasruddin Mavov against Sean Strickland. It happened against Brendan Allen. He fought Chris Curtis and got wrecked. It really feels like every prospect we get eventually just kind of fiddles out or dies out by the time they even hit the ranking. Now, name value wise, there is some name value, but it's mainly just Adesanya and Whitaker. I think Adesanya is that tier 2, Conor McGregor being tier 1, and then John Jones and Adesanya being tier 2 in that name value category. He does sell a lot of pay-per-views, Adesanya does, and it's mainly just him. I think he really carries the division name value wise, so I can't really put the rest of the division that high. We do have Bo Nickel coming up, so maybe he can make some waves name value wise, and if maybe Hamzat officially moves up to 185, he has some more name value there, but I just think it's mainly Adesanya carrying the division. That's really all I have for middleweight, so I will keep it at number 7. Yeah. At number 6, this is where things get a bit more tricky, but I think number 6 is fairly clear to me, and that is the light heavyweight division with Jamal Hill headlining it as their champion as of right now. Now, this division is, I would say, has a bit more coming up to do, a bit more growing up to do, and it's growing up really quickly. We're seeing more and more contenders coming in, and you can even argue that it's more old age top heavy than middleweight, but I do think there are a new wave of light heavyweights getting through. We're seeing Yuri Prochazka get through. We're seeing Jamal Hill, who just got through. Magomed Ankalaev is somewhat young. We do have Alex Pereira coming up, but he is, I would consider him a young MMA talent. Kickboxing, no, but an MMA talent, he's still a very young talent at that, obviously by his record. We also have Nikita Krylov on his come up. This division is very low-key deep. I don't think the prospects are the best as of right now. I think most of them have already hit the rankings, but I do think the talent and the skill is better overall than middleweight and heavyweight by a considerable margin. That's where I kind of rank it. Maybe not as much of name value as maybe a John Jones or Adesanya, but those two mainly kind of carry their division for the most part. I think in a consensus basis, I think you can definitely argue that light heavyweight does have more overall name value more than middleweight and heavyweight. I mean, really, there isn't really anybody really coming up so far right now that I can really say is a really good prospect at light heavyweight. Again, they're all kind of in the rankings. There is Carlos Ulberg. I think he is making some waves now, but I don't think he's that great prospect like you would have. So that's what I have for light heavyweight. Number 6, the prospects really kind of put it down that are outside of the rankings. That most of them are kind of already inside the rankings right now, the prospects. So what I have for them at number 5, now this is where things get really, really tricky, really kind of debatable, and I think kind of really heated in terms of your opinion and your belief of this. Now, number 5, this one might be a legit shocker. I have the flyweight division. This one I think is really obvious in my opinion. There's just no name value to really any of these guys. Brandon Moreno is kind of the first person to really break that name value, especially with Demetrius Johnson gone. He's really the first person to really come in and establish himself as a name, and he's not really even that huge of a name at flyweight. Granted, this is not the flyweight's fault. This is on the UFC because they don't market these guys good enough. They kind of trash these guys down. They put these guys on prelims of fight nights who are top 5 flyweights. They don't give these guys any sort of room to even build a name for themselves unless it's by themselves doing their own thing. So I do kind of blame the UFC for the treatment of the flyweights. Also not a very deep division. There is some good prospects though. We do have Muhammad Makayev coming up. We do have Manel Cap coming up. We have Jake Hadley coming up. We have a lot of good prospects in the flyweight division. So I do rate that one highly. In terms of skill, the reason why it's number 5, its skill level, I would say overall in every division, just in terms of the number 1 criteria, skill, I would say this is probably the second best division skill-wise. The majority of flyweight fights that I watched, that you really see, it's very technical, it's very high fight IQ, it's very high-level MMA. It's just, there's just not enough of them. That's the issue, and there's no name value at all to apply to these guys outside of Brandon Moreno. So hopefully the UFC can really, start marketing these guys so we can get this division being, higher on the list, in my opinion. It just needs that name value in some more depth in the division. But it makes sense. Flyweights, not many dudes that are that small that fight, so it kind of does make sense. But I wish this division was definitely higher. It's one of my more underrated divisions, in my opinion. Now, number 4, I feel like I'm making people mad right now, but I do have the featherweight division. I think that this division really lacks that name value, the same kind of name value that I have for the flyweight division. I think featherweight has just a bit more name value than the flyweights. And I think they're a little bit less skilled, but I think it's a more deep division. That's why I'm putting it over the flyweight division. And some of you right now might be like, what do you mean, bro? Volkanovski is a big name. He is a big name. When it comes to putting Volkanovski as a headline on a pay-per-view, you kind of want to pair him with like an Adesanya or a John Jones or somebody with a bigger name. You don't really want to put Volkanovski by himself on a pay-per-view, just main eventing it. You can certainly do that. You need to stack the card underneath of it for it to sell like how you want it to sell. If you put a Adesanya and then a Volkanovski 1-2 main event, co-main event, it basically sells itself at that point. But with Volkanovski alone, you kind of have to stack the undercard of it to really get it to sell to where you want it to. Like, again, back to the tier thing, tier 1 is Conor McGregor, tier 2 is John Jones and Adesanya, and then tier 3 is at Volkanovski. And then featherweight, I think, has a lot more prospects than the divisions below it, by far, in my opinion. We have fighters like Jack Shore, Nathaniel Wood. Ilya Tapira is now a contender now. He was really on the come up. He was a great prospect. William Gomez is looking pretty good as of right now. So it's a very deep division. Featherweight is one of the more deeper divisions. I just think it lacks in the name value. And it's also, I forgot to mention, it's also very, very, very top heavy. Basically with Volkanovski and Holloway running the entire division, just like how middleweight is. It seems like those new prospects are always coming up. That's why it's higher. There's always a new prospect making their way through the division, but it feels like once they hit Volkanovski and Holloway, it's pretty much a wrap at that point. So that ducks it a few points, not a lot, but just a few points. So I do have featherweight at number 4. And number 3, the top 3 here, I think you can really interchange them. I think you can really put whichever one you want anywhere. You can have any of these 3 divisions at 1, 2, or 3. But at number 3, this is a tough one. I'm going to put Bantamweight. I'm going to put Bantamweight right there at number 3. This division is, in my opinion, the most skilled division in the UFC. I think every fighter in there is high level or elite level. And it speaks volumes when you watch Raul Rosas Jr. fight Christian Rodriguez. Christian Rodriguez is a mid-level bantamweight, and he is that good. Once you get 1 or 2 wins at bantamweight, you're fighting killers at that point. You're fighting, high-level dudes. There's no room to be mid-level as a bantamweight. You have to be high-level or elite level to be able to succeed in this division. Otherwise, you're going to be outside the rankings fighting for a long, long time. trying to build yourself a name. And then prospect-wise, there's always a prospect at Bantamweight. There's always a new guy on the come up. Song Yadong's making his wave now. He's been here for a while, but he's making his wave right now. I mean, we got Umar, we got Javid Basharat, we got a lot of dudes coming up in this division that will be making waves here soon. So when it comes to depth, there's no question about the depth and the skill in this division. It's very, very high level. Where it does lack is that name value, but hopefully Sean O'Malley can change that. I think when it comes to name value, I think Featherweight might have a little bit over it. I think people just hate Aljo so much. But I think if Sean O'Malley becomes champ, that might sway things a little bit. But name value isn't really that awful for Bantamweight. Obviously, they're not the biggest names. We have people like Dominic Cruz. We have people like Pedro Munoz. We have a few people who can carry the division. We used to have Jose Aldo in here. So Piotr Jan's also a decent name. So like name value isn't the worst at Bantamweight. It isn't the best, but not the worst at all. I would probably rate this somewhere around, around 5 in terms of name value overall in the division. But Bantamweight is definitely top 3 in my opinion. I think it's really hard to argue it for it to be outside of that, in my opinion. I think you can't put this below 3 at all. Like 3 is the bare minimum for this division. And I'm pretty set on that one. Bantamweight, number 3. Now, number 2, I think this one, as time went on, this division kind of has grown on me, and I kind of had to force myself to put this at number 2. I kind of had to. I didn't want to. This division was originally my number 3, but I think now that I've really gone through and looked at it again, it's number 2. I think it is, and I think it's pretty clear number 2, and that is welterweight. But yeah, I mean, welterweight in terms of name value has always been there. We got Usman, we got Hamzat, we got Edwards now. Name value is not really an issue. Maybe it isn't the pinnacle like an Adesanya or a John Jones or Conor McGregor, but it is there. The name value is solid there. There's always good names. Prospects now are better than ever. I feel like there's more prospects coming up at welterweight than there ever has been. We got Jack Della Maddalena. He's been making waves for this division. Yeah, Shavkat, Hamzat made their waves to the division. Ian Gary too, Michael Morales. There's just so many up-and-coming welterweights right now. It's getting ridiculous. There's just so much talent in this division right now. It's insane to me. So in terms of prospects and name value, I have no issues with that. I think they're definitely higher up there in terms of those two. And then skill, I would have it probably at number, I think Flyweight's more skillful. I think Featherweight's more skillful. I think Bantamweight is definitely more skillful. So I would have it probably around 4 or lightweight I think is more skillful as well. So I have around 4 or 5. Like when I say skill, between 1 through 5, like the lower divisions, they're all pretty much neck and neck. I think just as you go up further and further in the division, you get more skill. Flyweights and bantamweights I have just about even, maybe bantamweight a little bit higher. Then we have like featherweight, obviously not as skilled as bantamweight, and then lightweight, obviously not as skilled as, or technical. I'm gonna say skilled, but as technical as featherweight. And then we have welterweight, which is obviously not as skilled as lightweight, but they're all really, really close. And you can make arguments for some, but it's not the most skilled division, in my opinion. But I think it's just so deep. I think the deepness of this makes the division really, hit different. And now, with no surprise, I think people kind of saw this one coming. I think when most people are asked what is the best division in the UFC, they do say the lightweight division. I think that one is a very common answer. Skill-wise, it's definitely up there in skill. I think it is really high in skill. I think it's just below some of the other weight classes, but it's still, really solid. And then prospect-wise, I think it's almost just as good as a welterweight. And that speaks volumes about how hard it is to succeed in this division. It's just like bantamweight, you know what I mean? Like once you get 1 or 2 wins at lightweight, you're not fighting any scrubs anymore. You're fighting dudes who are really good. It gets hard to cherry pick fights. Like cherry picking fights like a Paddy Pimblett, it gets really obvious for lightweight because you know that this guy is a lower skilled lightweight and you know that he could fight somebody that's more high level. So lightweight I think is, I wouldn't say it's clear cut number 1. I think you can argue welterweight. I think you can argue bantamweight. I think you can argue those top 3 can be at number 1. I wouldn't for sure put lightweight at number 1. I think it's my number 1. I think the name value carries it. The deepness really carries it. And obviously, it is one of the more skilled divisions in the UFC. I can't really dock too many points from it for not being as good as featherweight or bantamweight or flyweight. I can't put too many points down for that. You don't really see too much bad technical skill or technical grappling from lightweights. You kind of see that pretty unanimously throughout the division, unless you're Patty Pimlet. Don't know how that happens, but yeah, that's really all I have. Lightweight's the best division in the UFC, in my opinion. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. And I will be streaming Dern versus Hill this weekend, this Saturday. Come say hi, come hop in the chat and say how you doing, man. How you feeling today? It makes my day. I will appreciate that. Yeah, that's all I really have for you guys today. Peace.